Good afternoon, everyone. I guess that we are all a bit tired, but this is the last session for today. And we have three more presentations to hear. And first are Maria Ljuština and Katarina Dmitrovic, Rocky Road to Sokolica, a Middle Bronze Age pottery in central Serbia from Vatin to Bubanj Hum, Ljuljaci culture. So Maria, please share the Rocky Road with us.
So hello to everyone, just a second. I hope now you can see our presentation. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Maria Ljuština. I'm both happy and honored to be among you today. My colleague Katarina Dmitrovic and I shared our thoughts on the Bronze Age pottery from Serbia with you. So our presentation is under the title Rocky Road to Sokolica, Middle Bronze Age pottery in central Serbia from Vatin to Bubanj Hum for Ljuljaci culture. And I would just like to know whether slideshow started. I hope a normal slideshow started. So, despite being thoroughly studied throughout the whole 20th century, the Bronze Age in Serbia is still insufficiently known. Uneven state of exploration caused that the picture of the Bronze Age looked like a patchwork formed of many cultural groups. The cultural relationships among the groups, their chronology and territorial determination are still waiting to be defined more precisely. Meanwhile, studies of certain sites have been done inside boundaries of already named and determined cultural groups. In contrast to the flourishing settlements of Tel type, which characterized the first half of the second millennium BC and the Middle Bronze Age over the Carpathian Basin or Pannonian Plain, contemporary settlement sites of the Balkan, Central and Western Serbia remained almost invisible or poorly explored. Pottery makes majority of potable material from these sites, and its stylistic typological analysis provided a base for cultural attribution of the settlements and traditional connections with the Vatin culture from the Danube basin. One of these instructive sites is the hill-fort site of Sokolica. It is situated in the village of Ostra, near the town of Čačak, on the border between Western and Central Serbia. It is placed on a dominant rocky summit at the eastern periphery of the vast West Morava Valley. It is hardly accessible, and its hidden position could reveal the background of relations between Eastern and Western populations and cultures known through different ceramic styles. Unfortunately, stratigraphy of the Bronze Age settlement at Sokolica was completely destroyed during later activities at the site, and the pottery was analyzed using stylistic and typological methods. The first results indicated that during the Bronze Age, Sokolica was inhabited by the populations whose material traces were recognized as the Vatin culture. So, as already stated, archaeological image of the Carpathian Basin during the first half of the second millennium BC and the Middle Bronze Age is extremely diverse. It consists of a number of cultures defined first of all by differences in pottery styles. Whether we accept or not as correct the concept set forth by Christiansen and Larsen, stating that political territories were marked by differences in pottery styles, reflecting polities generally extending in diameter of 1 to 200 kilometers, and giving names to local cultures such as Wittenberg, Vatia, Vetero, Votomani, and Mađarovce. The Vatin culture has also its place among these pottery cultures. The Vatin culture has been known in archaeology as a distinctive cultural phenomenon since the beginning of the 20th century. Portable artifacts on the basis of which the Vaten culture was defined, in particular pottery material with its specific style, originates mostly from the Pannonian settlement type sites. Most of the pottery is monochrome, with a horizontal flute at vessel's belly, followed by warty protuberances as the exclusive decoration. This is the manner of decoration on the slightly profiled, sometimes biconical beakers with two rounded handles exceeding the level of the rim. The rims are mostly plain, in some cases rhombic or trapezoid. Typical of the Vaten culture is the panchvomolica or Danubian incised decoration, comprising spirals, volutes, and garlands, usually placed on most visible zones of belly or vessel's neck under the rim. This decorative manner is, in our opinion, inspired by nature, both from repertoire flora, volutes and garlands inspired by vetches or Vitis vinifera grapes, or fauna. Only to mention that even the first generation of explorers did not resist to term the specifically modeled handles as rabbit ears, using the specific decorative detail as one of the most impressive and easily recognizable features of the Vaten culture. If we focus on the pottery from Sokolica, the traditional comprehension and terminology, Pannonian Vaten ware, recognized in the heart of the Central Balkans, for a long period burdened its correct understanding and delayed better correlation to the neighboring areas. It is obvious, among other examples, in early contributions written by the two of us, who at that time, almost 15 years ago, just followed the opinions of many scholars dealing with this period. The necessity to belong or to be a part of a bigger cultural phenomenon prevented us from recognizing an independent creation developed in different cultural milieu and by the communities different than those from the Carpathian Basin. In search of the Vaten culture elements, the most prominent feature in the pottery corpus that we recognized were biconical beakers with trapezoid rims and two handles which can have protuberances on the top. The analogies can be found far to the north from Sokolica, as proven by the beaker from the site of Židovar in Banat. The dumpy beakers with trapezoid rims were recognized as the main determinant of connections with the Vaten culture, along with Anza lunata and Anza cornuta types of handles, which can all be found both in the pottery of Sokolica and in the Pannonian sites of the Vaten culture, such as Židovar, Gomolava, or Feodvar. Beside these shapes, the so-called vessels for frying or serving fish, which were recognized in the pottery of Sokolica, could be another relevant indicator for strong relation with the contemporary Danubian cultures, being that a number of sites in the Danube basin, such as Naiva Ciglana in Pančevo or Feodvar in Mošorin, provided beautiful collections of these boat-shaped bowls. However, the most noticeable connective element in pottery was the incised decoration, namely the volutes and garlands described in more detail on previous slides. Additionally, we noticed the metopization trend, particularly characteristic in the so-called Sirmia-Slavonia regional group of the Vaten culture, such as from the sites of Belegiš and Popov Salaš, but also in the northeast in Vaten, in the decoration of pottery from Sokolica. Fortunately, during the last 2 decades, approach to study of the Bronze Age sites and pottery significantly changed. Despite different labels, archaeologists generally agree on what is meant by style and are able to launch profitable discussions of stylistic variation or of particular styles without long introductory speech. At the core of the definitions used by a number of archaeologists with very different theoretical perspectives are 2 basic principles. First, style is a way of doing something, and second, style involves a choice among various alternatives. More recently, archaeologists have attempted to understand style from a more active perspective. The various definitions of style, along with other perspectives on style and material culture articulated recently, consider style to be a component of human activity. Such an approach can be recognized in the recent studies on the Vatin culture. 3 regional groups have been recognized on its original Pannonian territory: Pančevo Omelica, Kornešti Crvenka, and Sirmia Slavonia. So far, this approach, according to which regional variants are recognized, have proven to be the most relevant and has been accepted in scientific circles. When it comes to the problems of formal differences, especially regarding pottery style, decoration in particular, the priority has been given to regional specificities, which are due to differences in substrates or later external influences, rather than to chronological differences. Consequently, changes in perspective of cultural relations and interactions during the Middle Bronze Age led our colleagues Alexander Bulatovic and Jovica Stankovsky to the recognition of the Bubanj-Humfor Ljuljaci cultural group in central Serbia, with the biggest with trapezoidal mouth as a leading differentia specifica in pottery production. This caused a change in our perspective and creation of attitude that the pottery from Sokolica was of local, non-Vatin production. Although presence of beakers with trapezoidal mouth confirmed connectivity of the Central Balkan communities of Bubanj-Humfor Ljuljaci with the Northern Vatin, some specific ceramics from Central Serbia can still be recognizable as a part of a larger Vatin complex. The last decade brought qualitative changes, but it seems that there is still a long way in implementation of new cultural and chronological framework. Presence of Anza lunata type of handles and other characteristics in pottery style was interpreted as a local imitation of original forms from the north. This attitude is acceptable since it implicitly takes in consideration innovation, modification of technology of pottery manufacture. Factors which contributed to acceptance and spread of such innovations, aside from aesthetics, remained unknown. The limited number of settlement sites in the area of Central and Western Serbia, besides serious attempts in their recognition and exploration, disabled the opportunity for more detailed observation on chronology, cultural sequences, quantity and diversity of findings, so that Sokolica still remains one of the better-known monuments of the period. To the west, very few sites with small amount of ceramics are known. To the east from Sokolica, the settlement of Ljuljaci should be emphasized, which is very near, approximately 15 kilometers to the east, and very similar regarding the potable finds, which mostly consisted of pottery. These similarities are not occasional. Both sites represent the western periphery belt of this cultural entity, typical for Central Serbia in the Middle Bronze Age, recently termed the Bubanj-Humfor Ljuljaci group. The neighboring culture that developed within Western Central Serbia at the beginning of the second millennium is completely different. It is recognizable after burials on the mounds, while its pottery has different characteristics typical of the local Belvić-Belo Crkva group. Based on the current comprehension of the scene of the first half of the second millennium BC in the region, it can be concluded that the pottery of the Vatin culture from Pannonian Plain and the Vatin from Central Serbia were not produced by the communities of the same cultural entity. The term Bubanj-Humfor Ljuljaci is quite suitable for the communities from Central Serbian sites, being that cultural traditions from the previous phases of Bubanj-Hum culture are proved by analysis of pottery production for the most important vertically stratified settlement in Ljuljaci, not far from Sokolica. What also matters is that chronologically, both the Bubanj-Humfor Ljuljaci and the Vatin culture cover the first half of the second millennium BC. It was confirmed by the most recent radiocarbon data. Finally, it became clear that the pottery decoration was both an important element and useful tool for style definition and also attribution of the sites to certain cultural groups. Elements in decoration and pottery shapes, which are instructive of connectivity between Vatin and Bubenium for Lulotsi, are now comprehended as transmitted style in local production and not as the spread of the invasive northern culture in central Serbia. Sokolica is a good example of local manufacture which was influenced, inspired by the Vatin style from the northern neighbors. The same trends are noticed in preceding and following periods. Pottery production of other Bronze Age communities in Central and Western Serbia reveal influences from neighboring northern cultures. For example, early Bronze Age Beltić Bela Crkva is influenced by the Vinkovci culture, while the question mark is not hanging over the influence from Belagišvan culture on the West Serbian group of the late Bronze Age any longer. And that would be all that we prepared for you today.
Thank you very much for these new considerations about Batina and Bronze Age pottery. So if anyone has any questions, please type it here in this beautiful chat room, the best room. If no, I will have just one comment or a question. Did you consider or to do, or you already done some technological analysis, maybe archaeometry, to make some connections between, or try to connect style with technology and the differences between?
Fortunately, we launched a new project, which is one of the objectives of this project is this technological, let's say, emphasis on connectivity. So I hope in the very near future, during the next, let's say, 2 years, during the course of this project, we will have exact details concerning, let's say, technological confirmation or something else. So far, we are only at the beginning, but I think that the future is bright.
Yeah, we are looking forward.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Questions, chat, one. Okay, clap hands, Jasna Vukovic.
Thank you.
Okay, ciao.
Ciao.
Our next presenter is Miklos Takac with the presentation, Thoughts on the Level of Importance of Incised Decoration on the Pottery of 11th till 13th century Hungary. Please, uključite nam mikrofon.
Da, u redu. Odmah.
Vidimo vas. You can start.
Now, do you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, in my presentation, I will lead you to another epoch and another geographical environment, and also in an aim to show that the problems are very similar. I am going to speak about the problems of interpretation of the incised decoration of the pottery in medieval Hungary in 11th, 13th century. I will try to have the main question of my presentation as, does this incised decoration possess any kind of, let's say, deeper meaning? This question was elaborated by a lot of scholars in Hungary, mainly in its first phases as an ethnical interpretation. And the second one is the interpretation as it is a kind of a ritual, a form of a ritual interpretation. And I have to firstly tell you that this is a very, very let's say, a rudimentary form of insides decoration. It is consists of winding lines or curved lines, and then there are some single insides lines or bundle of them. So, as I said, these patterns were very often interpreted, and the first interpretation was ethnical interpretation. As I was I have written also more theses and several papers against this kind of interpretation. I will not repeat it. Now I will try to show how this ceramics or how this decoration can be interpreted in aim to understand it as a symbolic representations, perhaps connected also with the religious beliefs. These symbolic interpretations are usually connected with winding or curved lines, and the usual interpretation for them is that they are some way or somehow connected with the water which is cooked in the vessels. My own interpretation goes on an analysis of the ceramics dug on the site of Compolt, and on this site two complexes were found in a pottery kiln. So in a primary source for the analysis of pottery, and one of them was very large, consisting of more than 2013 items. So my question was, together with my colleague Andrea Vadai, whether this complex can show some kind of an aim of a symbolic interpretation. Our conclusion was negative. We could see that the decorations, the patterns of the decoration, insides pattern, do not correspond neither with the form of the whole vessel nor with its rim. And these decorations are repeating themselves almost randomly, and we could not find any let's say system in them, and therefore we had the thought that they could not fulfill the task, that they would have to show some deeper meaning. We also put the question why this kind of interpretation, of this symbolic interpretation, appears in the archaeology, and we had let's say a skeptical approach by showing that this is some kind of hope, when during an analysis of big amounts of ceramics, we have to find some clue that it makes this job easier to be done. But by our point of view, there is no symbolic meaning in these patterns. But preparing this presentation, I could see, I had to see that I have to see to check this negative conclusion by having another source material, and these were source material were represented by so-called ritual depositions. There are many cases when we find ritual depositions in the settlement archaeology of the Arpadian age. These are usually vessels in upside down position, and under it there are various types of findings like skeletons of dogs, little cats, birds, eggs, or some kind of metal objects, or there are also some lacking. There are also some example. Everything is lacking, but we can assume that there was something, but it could not survive the centuries. So let's see some examples for these ritual depositions, and I have to tell you that the vast majority of the literature dealing with this problem is in Hungarian, and there is one that you can see here that is written in English language, and one of my aims was also to make a short overview for those colleagues who are interested for these problems, but they have not the knowledge of Hungarian language. So let me start and present you some examples for these ritual depositions. We can say that these ritual depositions are usually appearing in settlements, in village-like settlements, with inside or outside of features. They are usually appearing in little holes as only a feature in those holes. And the first ritual deposition was published almost 60 years ago. We can say that these ritual depositions also appear inside of Grubenhaus type houses, like it was found by István Méri in 1964. It was a chicken in the floor of a Grubenhaus type house. The largest complex of these features and vessels were found in Budapest Kána, that is in the outskirts of Budapest, the medieval village called Kána, where not less than 21 ritual depositions were found, most of them with skeletons of little animals, one fish, and then dogs and cats. And we can say that the majority of them was put in little holes, but there were also some of them in houses or ovens. And there is also another form of these vessels or these depositions when you can find them, or one can find them in the ground walls of the churches. And this is the point that where we can have parallels in other regions of Europe. And this is the deposition where we can have also some ethnographical parallels from Volksballad, both in Hungarian, Romanian, and the South Slavic language. We have the issue that the wall is not going to stand if somebody is not going to be sacrificed. In Hungary, it is called the master manole sujet of the ballads. And as another type, we can also quote a very interesting deposition on a Roman site in Brigatio, that is on the Danubian limes, a fort. And there was in the vicinity no trace for a medieval settlement. The nearest medieval settlement was some 10 kilometers from the site. And though a medieval vessel was found within it an egg. We can say that we have a lot of archaeological traces for the fact that let's say the medieval people were amateur archaeologists who were digging in the Roman ruins, and perhaps it is some kind of belief that was because of which was this a vessel put in the Middle Ages in a Roman side beside a wall. Now, if we summarize all these things, we can say that there are more than 200 ceramic vessels found in this ritual context, and therefore it is an amount suitable for a question: what kind of typological or what kind of decoration is here on these vessels? Well, I have put some interesting pieces on these slides, and the one thing that you can see that there are very many of them with decorated walls. These are usually pots, but as you see, there is also jug. They are decorated with incised lines, and there are straight lines, and there are waves too. But as you see, there is practically no regular system in them. There is a big variety of incised patterns. And what is also very important, we have a lot of vessels without any decoration, with not decorated walls. And these are very interesting examples for this. These are also usually pots, but as you see, there is also cauldron. and these have no decoration at all. So the decoration was not closely related with the fact that this vessel should or can be used in a ritual context. So if we say this in a conclusion, that it seems to us, or seems to me, that this new material that I was collected also does not support the idea that the incised decoration in the Arpadian age, in the 11th, 13th century, could have some kind of a deeper meaning. So, as you see, these vessels were clearly used in a ritual context, but one can find no kind of let's say regularity in their incise patterns. So the question is, why was it so? Why is this difference between let's say the pottery of the Neolithic and the pottery of medieval times? It is, by my point of view, in the difference how the way of pottery production was organized. In the Middle Ages, in the period I'm dealing with, the pottery production was a serial production where masters were producing a series of vessels on slow-turned pottery wheel, and they were producing it for market. Let's say a rudimental, very rudimental, but though it's a market for people of their surroundings, whom they wanted to sell them. And then this is the way how the pottery was. This way of production means that there are series of pottery, as you see it on this slide. When the pottery of Győr, you can see that the same form, the same shape appears in very different heights, and that the same form was produced also as a little pot as a big one, and therefore this way of production is something that is opposing the thought that there have to be something symbolic or something that has to have a deeper meaning. And for the end, I have to tell you that there is also an example where this thought has to be a bit amended, because there are two sites in medieval Hungary where these pots used in a ritual context were pots that had the so-called bottom stems. In German, it is Bodenmarke. These bottom stems are closely connected with the technology of the slow-turn potter's wheel, and we see that on these two sides, pots were chosen to have serve as some kind of a part of a ritual context with their bottom up or bottom, and that this kind of a context has persuaded their users to choose pottery examples where we have these bottom stamps. But this is, I think, a secondary choice made by users and not the producers, not the potters' choice. So if we have to count with some kind of symbolic meaning, it should be always treated as some kind of a symbolic and secondary usage of pottery in a symbolic context. I hope I was legible. I hope that you have heard everything. So thank you for your kind attention. And I have to tell you that I'm very, very happy to be here, because I had a COVID infection, and this is a way how to struggle against it. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Miklos, on this presentation and sharing your view, your point of view, and your impressions about these really special pots. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions, please. If no, I will invite our last for today presenter, Anastasia Korokina, and she will tell us more about the decorational shift as a marker or cultural change, a case study from the late Bronze Age, settlement of Hlibokie Ozero in eastern Ukraine. Please.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me well? Yeah, thank you. I will share my presentation. Can you see the presentation? Yeah, thank you. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to make this presentation. Its topic is devoted to the change of decoration and more broadly ceramic tradition at the late Bronze Age settlement of Hlibokie Ozero II, located in the Seversky Donets River basin in eastern Ukraine. The main aims of the study are to illustrate the evidence showing how the change of archaeological and prehistoric milestones can be traced through a quantitative analysis of ceramic decoration and to test techniques of quantitative analysis of decoration of ancient pottery. Before dealing directly with the materials in question, it's important to outline the cultural historical situation in which the evolution of the site took place. During the age of the 2nd and 1st millennia BC, the transition from the late timber grave to post-timber grave cultures took place in the region. It is conventionally linked to the influence of foreign traditions and a new population inflow into the local cultural environment. According to the scheme of historical cultural development elaborated by a number of researchers and formalized by Jakub Hershkovich, at that time, the region of Dnieper left bank forest steppe, northeastern Azov region, and Seversky Donets basin was influenced by three components. Southwestern, associated with the Hallstatt cultures of the Carpatho-Danubian and Balkans, northeastern, originated in the late Bronze Age of the Upper Volga basin, and southeastern and eastern, associated with the Middle Volga, pre-Urals, and Kazakhstan. The impact of the third component is clearly pronounced in the materials of the Hlibokie Ozero II. However, specific manifestation of this phenomenon and its interpretation need to be detailed. The site under consideration was excavated in 1989-1991 by Jakub Hershkovich. As a result, a number of features representing dwelling remains were discovered and a scheme of the cultural stratigraphy was developed. The latter includes 4 layers. Layers 2 and 3 are subdivided into 2 horizons each, where the lower horizons are represented by features and the upper ones by their influence. Thus, the more detailed stratigraphic subdivision includes 6 horizons. The data on layer 4 were not used in further constructions, given the unrepresentativeness of finds in its context. The assortment of the pottery from the settlement is quite limited in terms of morpho-functional groups. Its majority is represented by jars and pots, the ratio of which is traditionally regarded as a cultural and chronological marker. Most of the decorated pottery shows the use of relief decorated techniques. The 4 layers or 6 horizons of the settlement show a smooth transition from the late timber grave culture to the post-timber grave culture. Relying on analogies, Hershkovich synchronized layers 1 and 2 with materials of the developed and late phases of the Sabatinivka culture of the late Bronze Age. The subsequent horizons were attributed to the next stage, which in this report is defined as the post-timber grave culture period. Before starting the decoration analysis, I'd like to highlight the evidence suggesting the shift in the ceramic tradition at the settlement. First of all, its indications were provided by a statistical analysis of the distribution of forms in the horizons of the settlement. On the contingency table, you can see on the slide, the part marked in red is the one that had high enough frequencies to carry out the association test. It has been found out that during the transition between horizons to B3A, there was a significant change in the ratio of odds and jars, which in the next stage tends to return to the average standards on the settlement. However, a comparison of the ratio of morpho-functional groups by layers did not capture this fact, as it took into account the total data for horizons 3A and 3B. The next interesting fact in favor of the shift is the ceramic tradition gives the elemental analysis of pottery. So far, we were able to take into account only the composition of major element using the SEM-EDS method. The elemental composition allows us to separate samples from the third layer from the first two ones. This means that it is likely that the pottery producers changed the location of clay procurement during the transition to horizon 3A. Performing quantitative analysis of the ceramic tradition on the site, I used chi-square test of association, multiple correspondence analysis, and measures of assemblage diversity, which are richness, Pilus index of evenness, and Shannon's entropy. The calculations were made in the R software. I will skip the overview of the methods used. If necessary, I will answer during the discussion. In the first stage, the decoration on the ceramics were classified according to the method proposed by Hershkovich. The classification allowed to distinguish two levels, elements and motifs. Thus, the decoration system was described as a pattern counting up 16 motifs and 102 elements. Nevertheless, just a few of them are mass and can be engaged into the statistical testing. On this slide, you can see the results of the classification. The next step, the question arose as to which units to compare. I made an attempt to compare in pairs all varieties of stratigraphic decorative taxa as well as morpho-functional groups of the ceramics. However, in two cases, layers elements and horizons elements comparison, the analysis is complicated by low frequencies, so no statistical tests were performed for these cases. The first test concerns the possible association of motifs and layers. The results for the whole table showed a small deviation from the expected values. This, however, is amplified when analyzing the part of the table that correspond to the transition between horizons 2B and 3A. On the right side, you can see so-called residuals from the subtraction of frequencies, which show a certain association of horizon 2B with cordons and horizon 3A with a motif called lines. A comparison of decoration motifs and morpho-functional groups also shows a deviation of observed frequencies from the expected ones. They allow us to associate cordons with spots and lines and zigzags with jars. The last comparison concerns morpho-functional groups and the two most common decorative elements. Here, jars probably are associated with element L3, represented by a horizontal line of elongated inclined notches, and pots are associated with element L5, which is the line of incisions. Also, in all the cases considered, deviations from the expected frequencies are not very big. Now, let us try to trace how the data on ceramic morphology, decoration, and stratigraphy relate to each other in multidimensional space. For these purposes, I have used multiple correspondence analysis. Foremost, I should mention that for the sake of simplicity, I consider the results only for the first two dimensions. For the same reasons, I analyzed only the moment of transition between horizons 2B and 3A. The contribution of the variables to the dimensions is also not commented on. However, given the relative simplicity of the data, I consider these informational losses to be non-critical. The main objective was to simultaneously trace the direction of change of the three types of variables in multivariate space. Comparison of layers, motif, and shapes of pottery that you can see on the slide show that the first dimension is determined by the opposition of the pots and layer 3 to the jas and layer 2. According to the overall data, these pairs of variables are associated. The second dimension is determined by the opposition of the frequencies of cordons and line, and their association with other traits are weak. The second version of the MCA takes into account the more detailed division of the assemblage by horizons. Here we should also state the association of jas with horizon 2b and pots with horizon 3a. However, the decorational taxa correlate with different variables from the groups defined by the first dimension, so that the first two dimensions seem to represent opposite trends. The third version of the MCA presents an attempt to compare layers, vessel shapes, and the two mass elements L3 and L5. The picture is close to the first variant. The deviations of the shapes and decoration frequencies represent different dimensions, and their correlation with the layers seem to be in a contradiction. To sum up, main groups of pottery traits, shape, decoration, and stratigraphic units do seem to show association in pairs, but they are not correlated in a multivariate space by the evidence of the Hluboký-ozero assemblage. And the possible explanation would be as follows. The transition between the 2B and 3A horizons was connected with the increase of pots, but this change hasn't touched the accepted norms of pottery decoration. This is confirmed by the frequencies of distribution of joint shape motif units in the horizons, which you can see on the right side of the slide. Here you can see a sharp increase in the proportion of pots decorated with lines in horizon 3A and its subsequent decline in horizon 3B. This fact may be considered as a violation of evolution of the late Timur ceramic tradition. Finally, the last fact to which I would like to draw your attention concerns the change of decoration diversity. The data on the motifs show that layer 1 has the lowest entropy and highest evenness throughout the taxa under comparison. In layers 2-3, entropy increases while evenness gradually declines. The data on horizons show more complicated picture. The above-mentioned trend can be traced throughout horizons from 1 to 3A. Then at horizons 3B, the diversity indices return to the standards of the earlier periods. The results for the elements, decorative elements, as you can see, in general, repeat the same pattern. A summary of the results can be presented in the following scheme. According to it, horizons 1, 2A, and 2B are connected with a relatively stable phase in the development of the ceramic tradition at the settlement. Although some changes, namely entropy increase, are observed already in the materials of layer 2. In the transition to horizon 3A, a disruption of this evolution is observed. After that, in horizon 3B, we seem to trace a tendency to return to the standards of the earlier periods, gravitating towards the tradition of the timber grave community. The explanation of this phenomenon could be inferred from the archaeological contexts. We probably managed to trace a critical moment in the development of material culture at the settlement, which, as one can speculate, is connected with the beginning of a new transitional stage to the early Iron Age in the region. As a final remark, the involvement of other variables in the analysis would reveal different interesting patterns in the evolution of ceramic tradition on the site, like the example shown on the slide, which involves layers, shapes, motifs, and surface treatment types. Thank you very much for your attention. I will be happy to answer